Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Now, for this video, I felt like doing some true crime stories. I figured I would do this because I'm doing journalism at university and I'm hoping to be a crime journalist when I get older. Now, I do have a true crime podcast which I did for a project for college, so I'll link that in the description below if you guys want to check that out. If you guys ever want me to continue that podcast, because I think I only did 3 episodes, I will happily resume that podcast for you guys. But I figured it'd be nice for you to see me and actually talk about it. Now, I figured I would make it more entertaining, so I decided that I would do it while doing my makeup. Now, there are obviously a few people that have obviously done this. I wanted to do it because I have a TikTok account that's for my makeup, and I have done a few makeups to crime stories on there, and I just figured it would be a lot more entertaining than me just sitting here talking to you about a story. So let's get into the video. So with a lot of these stories that I've obviously pre-researched because I had to for my college project, a lot of these stories do go into very, very graphic detail. I will try not to talk much about them. I will vaguely mention a few things. Luckily with this first story, there isn't too many graphic details. I will try and make it as short as I can on the details, but with some of these stories, obviously there is quite a lot of graphic detail, so I will obviously warn you guys in advance. So let's get into this. I'm just going to grab my little headband because I don't have any of my pins, so we're just going to use this. Okay, so for our first story, we're going to be talking about the mass murder of the Knight family. Now, this occurred in Colorado in 1958. It was said that Merrill Knight, who was 47 at the time, along with his wife, also 47, and their 15-year-old daughter were murdered inside their home by a former friend of their father's. Now, there was also the son, Kenneth, who was in the house at the same time, but had managed to escape. Now, during my research, I couldn't really find anything on Kenneth after the massacre occurred. I don't know what happened to him, whether he left, got married, or when he died. I couldn't seem to find anything on this family apart from the article that I found online. There is no other articles about this family. There is many different newspaper clippings of this family, but I read the article and I immediately knew that I would have to talk about it. The killer of our story was David Early. Now, David Early was 29 years old when he decided to kill the family. He had been in and out of jail quite a few times before. He served time in Pennsylvania, Oklahoma, and Colorado from the years of 1955 and 1957. During Early's very, very long time in and out of prison, he eventually became acquainted with an then attorney, Mr. Knight, who had decided that he would take on Early's case and try and help get him out of jail. While he was in prison, many of the doctors had diagnosed Early as a dangerous psychopath. So already you can tell that he was not right in the head and something was just very, very off. And this story definitely takes a turn for it. He was 29 years old when he was finally released from jail. He had been serving time for aggravated robbery and had decided that he wanted to return home to where his uncle had been living, and he wanted to be reunited with them. So they agreed to his wishes and allowed him to return home. Now, as Early had decided to take the bus home, he had arrived home to the Knight's family house in Greenwood Village in Colorado, as you can see here. He entered the house through an unlocked door on the basement, and upon returning home he found that he was the only one in the house. So he decided that he would look around for any valuables or any money he could find. His ulterior motive. All he wanted was money, and he was determined to get it. Now, upon looking for all of his money, he found a .22 caliber rifle in the back of Mr. Knight's wardrobe. He decided he would load it, and then decided to sit in the chair in the living room where he would wait for the family to return home and eventually find him there. Regina Knight was the first of the 4 family members to return home. Upon returning home, she found Early sitting on the chair, pointing a rifle at her, scared of what to do and what he might do to her. Early forced her into the master bedroom, where he would tie her up to the bed, waiting for the others to come home. The second person to come home was the 2 children, Mrs. Knight's stepchildren, 15-year-old Karen and 17-year-old Kenneth, who, upon returning home, found their mother and Early waiting for them. Now, Early had pointed a gun at them, and they were confused and very shocked. They didn't know what to do, and they were terrified to run. Early then led 15-year-old Karen into her own bedroom, upstairs on the 3rd floor. He would then tie her hands with stockings and leave her be. He then returned to Kenneth and brought him into his parents' bedroom. He then tied Kenneth to the foot of the bed with stockings and awaited the return of Mr. Knight. Mr. Knight would then return home precisely around 5:30. Returning home, he obviously found no one to be there, apart from Early. Early then forced Mr. Knight into a 3rd bedroom in the house, where he would bound his hands and feet together with stockings. Before he started to bound his hands and feet together with stockings, he, again continuing to search for money around the house, took the wallet out of Mr. Knight's trousers, which presumably only had around $60 in it, so it wasn't enough for him at the time, and he insisted he wanted more money. He then bound Mr. Knight's hands straight behind his back. Once he had tied all of the family up, he continued to look for any more valuable things and money around the house. However, he had no luck. After he finished his search, he told the family that he would happily leave after it got dark. However, something happened that wasn't in Early's part of his plan, and that was the appearance of Varian Ashbor. I think that's how you pronounce her name. I believe it is that. If I have said that name wrong, I'm so sorry. Now, Varian Ashbor was a contractor who worked alongside Mr. Knight, and she had worked with him earlier that day as well. Upon working together, she had realised that she had forgotten to give him some very important contract. Before he would leave for his flight to LA, she decided that she would go to his house and drop them off for him. Now, when she arrived at the house, she tried the door and rang the bell, but there was no answer. So she decided she would go round to the front and found that the front door was unlocked. As she started to push the front door open, she found what appeared to be a young man walking towards her. In Miss Ashbourne's statement to the police, she stated that Early was a very polite and calm young man. When they were speaking, she had asked him if the Earlys were home. She asked if Mr. Knight was home, and the young man had replied that he was. However, that he was in the bathtub. When Miss Ashbourne then replied, asking where Mrs. Knight was, he then replied that she was very busy. Not behold that anything was wrong, she gave the letters to Early and asked if he would give them to the family, which he replied he would, and she then left. A few minutes after Ashbourne had left, Early decided he would check up on his captives. Upon checking up on them, he found that Mr. Knight had actually freed himself and was lunging towards him. As he lunged towards him, without thinking, Early shot him 3 times in the chest. Early died later that night. By this time, Early started to panic. He realised that this wasn't what he wanted. Early had begun to freak out, realising what he had done. He started to think that he didn't want any witnesses left behind. He then proceeded to go into the mother's bedroom, where Regina Knight and Kenneth were still tied up. As he entered the bedroom, he walked over Kenneth towards his stepmother and shot her in the head. Now, I've also read the description from when she died, that apparently she was also shot twice in the chest and once in the head as well. I'm not sure which one is true, whether it was just a shot to the head or if it was a shot to the head and 2 to the chest. If you guys know which one it is, do let me know in the comments below, because I wasn't 100% sure what one it is, so I figured I would mention both of them. Now, after he shot Regina in the bed, he then left Kenneth still tied up with stockings in the room and proceeded to go into Karen's bedroom, where, again, I don't know which one is true, because on the article I found it says that Karen was shot once in the head just like her mum. However, there was another article from her death that stated that she was actually shot in the head and in the stomach, and that you could tell because there was a toy dog left beside her that was covered in blood. Now, apparently, for the time that it took Early to descend to the 3rd floor to go and shoot Karen, Kenneth, who was in the bedroom, had managed to free himself and was able to escape. Now, Early found him escaping and loaded the rifle. He shot once towards Kenneth but missed, and in doing so, the rifle jammed. This allowed Kenneth to break free and go to the Wilson's house. I believe they were neighbours to the Knights. Now, the Wilsons were having a housewarming party, which Varian Ashbourne was also in attendance. It said from police statements that Kenneth entered the house and screamed, "Mother and father have just been killed." Several men from inside the housewarming party that Miss Ashbourne was attending had run outside and noticed that Early was getting into a car that was on the Knight's property. Now, without thinking, they decided to get into their own car and follow him. They didn't really know what else to do, considering they didn't really have any loaded guns in the car. So they did the only reasonable thing that they could think of, and that was to ram into the back of the car, and hopefully stop him from escaping. This did work. They did ram into the back of Early's car, and luckily they were able to jump him and hold him down until the authorities arrived. Now, as the men were holding him down, Kenneth and other people from the party had joined where he was. As soon as Kenneth and the others had arrived from the party, one of the men that was holding him down grabbed the unloaded shotgun and aimed it at Early. Now, Early didn't know that the shotgun was not loaded, and upon thinking that it was, he finally decided to stop struggling. This murder was so bad that people had started to compare it to the Clutter family murders that I believe occurred in Holcomb, Kansas, I believe that's what it says, that happened 19 months later. So it was quite a bad massacre. Now, after the authorities had arrived, Early was taken to a correctional jail in Colorado. I'm not 100% sure what this jail was called. I will definitely look it up. But he was held there until his execution date would arrive. Upon going to the county jail, he dictated his sentence, wrote out his confession from his own hand. In a statement reported from an interview taken with him, it is said that apparently he was pasty-faced, and upon the jury reading out the crimes he committed on the family, he sat there and smiled. This is when you definitely know that something is not right with these people. He had no remorse in his face whatsoever and only smiled when he heard of the crimes that he had done. Now, there was a separate story that was released on the same day that the interview with Early would be broadcasted, and in that statement, which was taken from the sheriff, he quoted that Early said, "I'd do it again under the same circumstances." His direct quote came from his own confession. On the exact same year that he committed the crimes, on December 3rd, he would sit in front of a jury and wait to hear the verdict. Now, it only took the jury 25 minutes to conclude that he was in fact guilty and was sentenced to death by the gas chamber. Now, personally, I believe that this was one of the worst ways to die. I know that obviously a lot of people would say that death by the electric chair was one of the worst ways to die, but frankly, I think I would rather die from electric shocks going through my body than basically suffocating and dying through that. I get that obviously it's quicker and probably less painful because you basically go unconscious before you suffocate, but it's my personal opinion, I wouldn't want to die. Now, on his very last evening that he was alive, a warden would go to his cell and read him the death penalty rights. Early would then be taken by guards and guided all the way to another section of the jail. It was said that he was taken into what they called the Pentagon, which was a hexagonal type chamber where he would then be told to strip down and was issued the white clothing that prisoners wear when they're about to be killed. Early was then strapped into a steel chair where a Catholic priest, who would usually read the victims their rights before they die. It said that his final statement to the priest and to everyone else was, "I hope God forgives me." That was the last ever statement anyone heard for him before they closed the doors and activated the chamber. On 7:59 p.m. on August 11th of 1961, when his execution date was, the door to the chamber was sealed. They then proceeded to put sodium cyanide acid pellets into I believe it was like a cylinder of, I think it was sulfuric acid, and that obviously created the gas that was then put into the chamber. Now, it didn't actually take long for him to start to suffocate. Early tried his very best to hold his breath for as long as he could, in hopes that it would give him a much longer chance at survival. He believed it would give him a longer chance to survive if he was to hold his breath for as long as he could. Now, as he did this, the gas chamber had begun to fill up. Now, as much as holding his breath would help him, it actually only allowed him to hold his breath for a minute. And even then, that wasn't quite enough to save him. Now, this wouldn't be enough to save his life. It, in fact, didn't help him at all in any sort of way. It may have gave him a minute to comprehend a lot of stuff, but it wasn't going to save his life. Now, after he held his breath for a minute, he then decided to do the only thing he could think of, and he compulsively took a big breath. Now, as he did this, he obviously inhaled everything. After he took a really big breath, he became unconscious within 10 seconds. Now, within him becoming unconscious, this was around 8:05 p.m. So he'd already been inside the chamber for only 5 minutes before anything really started to take place. At 8:05, after he took his final breath, his body was convulsed with everything in the room, and he became still for about 2 minutes. This meant that at 8:07 p.m, his body was then pronounced dead. Now, like I said at the very beginning of this video, unfortunately there is not any other articles apart from the one that I found that states what happened to Kenneth. Unfortunately, I don't know how old he was when he died, or what happened to his life after his mother, father and sister were killed. I have tried so hard to find other articles that may give any inkling as to what happened to him, but unfortunately there are none out there. If I do find any information, I will leave it in the description below, but I really hope you guys liked this makeup look. It was definitely quite interesting for me to be able to think it up on the spot, considering with my TikToks I am able to think of what to create before I create it. But I really hope you guys liked this video and were very interested in this story as I was. And if you guys have any stories you think I should tell, or that you know of, or even if it's a story that has happened in your area or that you know of, please let me know and I would love to talk about them. Like I said, I'm doing journalism at university and I hope to be a crime journalist. So doing stuff like this is something I hope to be able to talk about a lot and obviously do as a future career. So anything like this, as weird as it is, fascinates me, and I'm sure it fascinates a whole lot of you. Make sure that you like this video. Don't forget to press the subscribe button and leave me a comment, as I love responding to so many of you guys. My socials will all be in the description below, as well as my podcast, so feel free to check that out as well. That would do me a massive honour. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. See you next time. Bye guys.